Welcome back to Spenwood Studio on the lake. Snow last week, still staying around. Time to do a snowman. So this guy was built, and he's not finished painted. I just did the rough painting on him. He gets gold on his hats, a little bit of gold on his scarf, a little more snow on him. But he is made out of branches. So I got a pine branch from a pine tree that died on the lake lot here, and cut it down last summer. And I went out and grabbed a chunk of it, and he came out. So when I was doing Christmas stuff for down south, I do a quick sketch of this guy. It's rough. You can't get any artistic value out of that. Standard snowman. There's the branch, or that's actually part of the trunk of the tree. This was probably a 80-foot tall tree growing in among other trees, and it got choked out and died. So rather than do a standard snowman with 3 balls, I did the snowman with the big ball on the bottom, ball on the top, and gave him the standard top hat. And then he gets a scarf in there. And this thing has started to split. Even just the fact that I cut it, ran it through the chainsaw, got this piece off, brought it inside the Stuga, and in the course of 2 days, he started to split. And you can see that in the back. I just ignored that because he's made out of a whole tree, as you can see, and he will probably crack a little bit more. I put the crack in the back. There are people that talk about the closer grain running to one side. It won't crack there, but here's a Cutsall round spear burr, a bigger one, and I'm just going to roughly go and rough the shape out of this guy. And right now I'm setting his hat in there where his hat needs to be. This is a pretty aggressive bit. It's a standard, but it's one of their bigger spear balls, and it's from Cutsall. It's one that they sent me while we're trying to work out some issues that I was having with some Cutsalls. This one does not have a finish on it. It wasn't dipped, and it has a little burr on it. And another one that they sent me 10 or 12 to look at and see if we can figure out what the vibration issue was with these. I think the first vibration issue is all these, the Cutsalls and the saber tooth burrs, are rated for 20,000 RPM. And I've never run a bit at 20,000 or a burr at 20,000 RPM in my life. All the hand pieces run somewhere around 40. This one will go to 50, although I never run it up there unless I'm doing a sanding operation or something, a burnishing operation. But I think that might be a little too fast. I've tried running them down around 20, and you still get a vibration at 20. So it's not like a car going down the road where you'll get a vibration at 40 and then it'll stop at 50 and etc. These couple of these burrs, as you know, in the past 6-8 months, I've had a little trouble with new ones not doing or having a vibration. When you pay $15 or $20 for a burr, of course you want that. And I love Cutsall burrs. Don't get me wrong. I know Jordy Johnson loves Cutsall burrs, and as do a lot of other people. But I also like the saber tooth burrs. They both have good qualities. But we're trying to work it out. We're going to get it worked out, and see what's going on with these. But they did send me one. One of the burrs won't go in the collet. And so that just tells me there's a little bit of a quality control issue, and I'm going to package those up with my thoughts and send them back to those folks. And hopefully we can get that fixed. Center lines all the way around, because I don't want to give up on Cutsall. They've had a good product. I've used them for 20 years. I just want to help them fix what they got going on. So put my center lines in so that I know I can cut all the way halfway down. This is kind of interesting for those of yous, that sounds like a Brooklyn guy, right, that are beginners. You'll notice I just went over a place where when I took this guy to the bandsaw and cut the rough contour on the other side, you can see I'm going down the line here. On the other side, I've got a V out of there, and that's kind of into where I want to go into a round. So I'm keeping that in mind, and I'm not going completely round down to that. I'm going to end up taking everything around to that lowest point on his head, but I'm going to do it slowly and try to stay in the round. But eventually I got to get that little V that's under my hand right now out of there without making that head too small. Now I can get away with that by kind of cheating him out of a circle or a spear and making him kind of oblong on the one side, and you won't be able to notice that, hopefully. Well, you won't. I know that because I've seen the finished product. So this is not good wood. This is just a piece of a pine tree. I don't know what kind of pine tree, probably white pine, something along those lines. And I keep drawing back in the center lines. That's going to be his face. There is a scarf, standard, nothing secretive about these. One thing I did notice the other day, we were watching Frosty the Snowman with the grandkid, and the time honored that comes out about this time of year. They used to come out after Christmas specials. Used to come out after Thanksgiving, and in the latest future here, everything starts getting accelerated. It won't be long before we have Christmas stuff coming out in June. But they didn't used to do it till after Thanksgiving. Well, Thanksgiving still is next week, so they're a little premature putting these things out. But he's a standard guy. He's got all the stuff that they do. He's got 2 eyeballs. I'm gonna have 3 buttons. Gonna have a smile. I didn't like his eyes where they were. I just thought I might move them up a little bit there. That's what that scribbling is. It's not eyebrows. But he's got a hat, top hat. He's got a scarf. And interesting, if you're watching streaming videos now, they have the warning up on the top. Has cussing, nudity, sex, sensitive subjects, and smoking. Oh my God, smoking in there. So guess what's missing from all the newer, when I was doing the references, I just flipped through the web on images. I do a Google search, and then I'll combine or pirate some figure. But what's missing? The pipe is missing. Remember? Corn cob pipe. So this guy didn't get a corn cob pipe because I'd have to click smoking in there, and that would be bad in the woke culture that we live in nowadays. I try not to offend people. I'm old enough now that it doesn't amuse me anymore to annoy someone, and it's best just not to annoy people. So I'll be politically correct. I'll leave the pipe out of this character. But if he were a traditional snowman, he would have a corncob pipe in there. So that's a saber burr in there. And I'm just reliefing around, and you can see that I did a rough round shape on this guy. I got him basically down where I wanted him to. And then I cut the features in. If you have features that stick out more than your round, you'll have to plan on leaving those, and you just leave those as blocks around these guys. That's the hardest thing to do in carving in the round. You've got to leave a big enough of a chunk so that you can rough out and get your shape underneath. And ironically enough, that's where the challenging carving comes in. The reason the gnomes are so simple to carve is you get to take everything away all at one time, and what you're left with is there. In this case, I have to leave this high spot for the scarf. It has to blend in, and then I've got to go under the scarf and do the rounding. And you'll notice on the head, that V that I was talking about, it's right there on the left side. You can just see what's left of a small line of that. See that line right there? That's the bottom of that V. And I still, at this point, I didn't get the opportunity to take that out, but you'll notice that it's becoming less and less an image. You can see it there under my left hand. That's where I cut too deep when I did the blank. And his head became, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch smaller than I was planning. So I'm just tapering up under his hat. Hats are tricky. This is Snowman, so it's not tricky. You can put the hat anywhere you want. If you're putting this on a person or a gnome, the hat is actually over the, usually in the upper third part of their head, not sitting on top of their head, if that makes any sense. You can see that split developing in the back. I think that'll go right to the center and then stabilize. I don't necessarily care about that. A lot of the early decoys that I did out of wood that was less than premium have cracks in them. Some of the rustic decoys that I do, they will crack down through it, and I don't fill those anymore. I tend to leave those alone. if they're rustic. Now, however, if I'm doing a decorative decoy or a higher dollar commission carving, I will repair those, and I try to use wood that's stable. I might even glue up a couple pieces of basswood. I might run them through the surfacer and the planer, and then change the grain direction on those so that they don't move. I've got some pretty neat carvings that I did 20 or 30 years ago that in the wintertime, the cracks open up on them, and the temptation is to fill those and repaint them, but I don't. And then in the summer, as soon as the heat is no longer in the house, those cracks will close up, and you can't even tell that. We've got a lot of antique furniture that does the same thing, and it's just little things you learn over the years with carving. So I've got him down, getting him down to the finished portion where I want him, kind of round, going round. I'm happy with it. I like what's going on there. I'm going to draw those center lines and the eyes back in. It'd be kind of fun to look at how many times I've drawn center lines in on these guys. So notice this time I put his eyes up a little bit higher. There's his nose. It's going to be a carrot nose. I did leave it. There was a little bit of the eye left, or the smile still left there with the red pen. And those of you that are doing videos, you shouldn't use red marker on that. The reason for that, a permanent marker. The reason for that is you'll nick your hand or finger with it, and as you go ahead and film the carving, it looks like you have cut yourself and bled, and that's a bad optic if you're a wood carver. All those of you that subscribe, if you haven't subscribed, by all means, I would invite you to. It doesn't cost you anything. You may see something in the future. It may pop up for you that you'll like. It certainly helps the channel out. Leave comments. It helps the channel out. Click a like. It helps the channel out. This is the eye carver, or the eye tool. I bought it from Amazon. A lot of people like to use them for bird eyes and various different things. People will build these. Mike over at Stennis Sticks builds his own. I'm too lazy to build my own. I haven't had a little Shoreline mini lathe and mill that was in the studio that burned in the fire. I could have machined one of those pretty quickly. And when we get back up and running, we'll have those mills back up, and I'll probably make some of these, because this one's poor quality, but it does do the trip. You really have to press down on it. So there's a ruby bit in there now. The ruby bits, you can't get those from Cutsall. You can't get the ruby bits from Sabertooth. You have to go to like Rocky Mountain Carving or any of the woodcraft carving spots and look at the ruby and sapphire burrs. We used to call these bits in the old days B-I-T-T-S. Now we call them burrs, B-U-R-R-S, with the advent of carving. I've talked about burrs before. I've got videos in there. If you go back, subscribe to the channel, go through I'll take you down through all of the basic different burrs. I don't use Dremel burrs. They are not designed for carving. And that's not to take away from Dremel. There are many fine Dremel things out there. A lot of people use the Dremel 4000 with a handpiece on a cable. That works out good if you're doing stuff like Geordie and a lot of those characters. And you're doing the bigger carvings, you certainly can work with a flex cable. I've carved with the flex cable in the past with various different motors on there, and I found that I'll snag those or get them up, and I end up breaking the cable, and that really annoyed me, because then you had to put another $20 cable inside of a flex sleeve, and I graduated to these handheld power carvers 25 years ago, and I've kind of stuck there ever since. If I were to do some bigger projects, I would probably pull out the individual motors. Fordham makes one in addition to Dremel, and so do a lot of other people, a little quarter horse with shafts that you can hang up in the corner. If I start doing bigger carvings, I have those. I would probably pull those out, use them. Those will take, some of those will take a quarter-inch burr, and these little hand pieces won't take a quarter-inch burr. Obviously, you can't get a collet, but they're just not powerful enough. And then when you get into those 1/4 inch burrs, that's when you really catch a bind and wind that cable up and snap it. So I'm coming back, and this has put the eyepiece has put a burner or a bottom in there, but it gets kind of lost in the carving because it's burnished down in there as opposed to cutting necessarily. So I'll come back with the wood burner, and it does a real nice outline on that. And then I can go back and carve down a little bit deeper and leave that eye proud. So he's getting a happy-go-lucky smile. I do not have to worry about where his corncob pipe is going to go because that's just not politically correct today. So I'm of the age where I remember everybody smoked. I'll just pull a number out of my butt. Probably 80% of the old folks smoked. I do remember a lot of them when they got in their late 50s, early 60s, grandparents and aunts and uncles and that sort of stuff. That one day I smoked, and I would be smoking out on the ranch, and they weren't smoking. And they said, I had to quit a year ago. The doctor said I had to quit, so I quit. So they smoked all their life. But that's not politically correct anymore to smoke, and it's not good for you. So any of you kids watching, don't smoke. Bad, not good. So now I'm just outlining, and one of the reasons I outline is it gives me a nice clean paint line, typically where I can put two different colors of paint and get them together, and they have a tendency not to run into or through each other at that point. And you can see I left him a little bit rough. This is not a good piece of basswood. His scarf is folded over and around. I didn't go through the elaborate part of making a tie there. You'd have to think about that. If you're doing some Celtic carving, you'll get into how the knots and things cross over and tie, and that's kind of fun. But this was supposed to be simple, and so it shall be. This really wasn't a bad piece of wood to work with. I didn't use any hand tools on it, chisels and knives, but I think it would have worked just fine. There are some knots in those brown spots. You see, that's where the branches were coming through the tree, and they eventually get absorbed as the tree gets bigger. That turns into a little different grain. It's a little bit harder. It's a lot more difficult to work. If you start getting into hardwoods like oak, and if there's a knot there, you will bend nails trying to get them through those portions. So there's that crack. It's kind of neat. You can see the growth rings in the tree. I mean, if I counted them really quickly, there'd be what, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's probably a 15-year-old tree. And you can see the center is off under the M there, so you think the crack would go to where my little finger keeps ending up over there at the 12 o'clock position, but it's actually over to 3. So I'm not sure about that closest grain where the grain starts to go together. That's where it's going to crack. That may or may not be true. I don't know. So here's a couple branches that I went out and picked up. I just walked out and found a branch that had fallen down, and it had a couple of forks in there. The goal was to try to get 3, a minimum of 3, and I think I got that in there. Here's a little piece of basswood, a piece of scrap, and this is going to be a carrot. So he gets a carrot nose, and it's just quicker to grab a knife with a carrot nose and make it happen. Now, for painting this guy, I use Josonia paints. There's been some discussion lately about paints and quality of paints. I do use, I gotta admit, the professional grade paints, because I figure if I took the time to make a piece, I want the paint to be of the quality of the piece. And professional paints have a little bit more pigment in them. They are a little bit brighter. They have better coverage. But they are a little bit more expensive. And if you get into the really crazy high art world part, they, over the years, will not yellow. So they won't tarnish and they won't yellow. They're what they call archival. So I don't know if you've seen restorations of paintings. You see a painting in there. That's a pretty nice painting. It was painted in 1550, some famous figurine, and then it got a cleaning and a restoration from an art restorer, someone who spent a year with a cotton swab, slowly rubbing off years and years of smoke and pollution and that sort of thing, and then they show you the painting at the end of it, and it's, oh my God, this got actual colors in it. That would be archival. So if you clean all the gunk on the outside of the paint, it's not varnished, it's not tarnished. The varnish will turn yellow that's on the outside, but they remove that and put another layer on it. So that's why I use professional paints, is that someday they can be restored. Maybe not a good reason. So you're using 5-minute epoxy on his nose. I'm going to play around with the branch here. I cut it down, I tapered it. I'm going to drill a hole in there. I'm trying to see the angle that I want to put this hole in there. And poof, that's about it there. His finger's up in the air. And I'm not going to clean the bark off on it because I want it to stay that way. Now, unfortunately, anything you leave bark on, if you don't varnish the heck out of it or lacquer it and leave it indoors, eventually the wood will shrink and the bark will fall off. So that bark will fall off. And when I'm doing stuff, I told you I pull my references from the web, but then I'll draw it out. This piece of paper on the back probably has two or three more drawings on it. While I'm sitting there bored watching TV, I get an idea of something to carve, so I'll draw a quick, badly rendered sketch, and then I'll take that sketch out. If you look at me sometimes, you'll see me looking over to the side. I'll lay that sketch off on the side so I can reference that. I do put stuff up on the iPad, on a, I don't know, 12-inch iPad that is able to sit there in the corner, and I'll use that as a reference if I'm doing a bird or something. And you can see there's the arms going in. Excuse me, big old yawn there. I am down in Iowa doing the voiceover on this, and I'm waiting for the furnace to kick in the condo at any time, and I'll have to pause everything and do a break. So there he is, Mr. Snowman. He gets a gold band around his hat, gets a couple more layers of paint on there, gets a little bit of antiquing, and then I put some gold threads into his scarf there. And then he's already gone. He went down to Madison. I don't know that he'll sell or not. He's pretty standard. He's not old school because he doesn't have a corncob pipe. I keep griping about that. But here's another piece in a video that was published just a little while ago. This is a Geordie Johnson LED Christmas tree. And this is probably the first and the last one I'll do. And that may not be true, but it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. Do you care? Nobody cares. Hey, thanks a lot for watching. Like, subscribe, and comment. This has been Bandwidth Studio on the Lake.